All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we've got a fascinating story for you, a tale of two democracies. Now, imagine this, both countries faced with the exact same challenge, a super diverse population. But one chose a path that led to unity, while the other, well, that path led straight to civil war. So what made the difference? Let's find out.
And just so you know, this whole explainer is designed to get you completely exam ready for Class 10. It's brought to you by all of us here at A1 Institute. So hey, if you find this useful, do us a huge favor, hit that like button, share it with your friends, and definitely subscribe for more content just like this. Okay, so let's jump right in with a question that really gets to the core of what we're talking about today. You've probably heard this idea before, right? That sharing power is basically the same as weakening a country, like you're just slicing up a pie until there's nothing left. But is that actually true? Let's dig in and see. So here's our game plan for today. First, we're going to tackle this whole power sharing puzzle. Then, we'll take a trip to two very different places, Belgium and Sri Lanka, to see how they dealt with this challenge. We'll compare their choices, see what happened, and then I'll give you the final verdict, and most importantly, the key takeaways you're going to need for those exams. All right, first up, the power sharing puzzle. You got to think about it like this. In a real democracy, power isn't meant to be held by just one person or one group. That's not how it works. It's not a monopoly. The secret sauce, the thing that makes a democracy strong and stable, is having a smart way to share that power. Okay, so let's introduce our two case studies. On one side, we have Belgium, right in the heart of Europe, and on the other, the island nation of Sri Lanka in Asia. Now, on the surface, they're pretty different, but they share two huge things in common. They're both pretty small countries, and they both have incredibly diverse populations. And that diversity, well, it created a massive challenge for them. How do you govern a place like that fairly? Let's start with Belgium. Take a look at this breakdown. It's kind of complicated, right? You've got 59% of the people speaking Dutch. Then you have 40% who speak French, and a tiny 1% who speak German. Simple enough? Well, no, because then you get to the capital city, Brussels, and the whole thing gets turned completely upside down. And this is what I mean by upside down. Check this out. In the capital, Brussels, it's the complete opposite of the rest of the country. A whopping 80% of the people there speak French, and only 20% speak Dutch. So think about that for a second. The French speakers are the minority in the country as a whole, but they're the huge majority in the capital city. This created some major tension. The Dutch speakers, the majority everywhere else, suddenly felt like a minority in their own capital. Okay, now let's jump across the globe to Sri Lanka. The situation here is quite different. It's not as complex as Belgium in some ways. Here you have one very, very clear majority group, the Sinhala speakers, making up 74% of the population. The biggest minority group are the Tamil speakers, who make up about 18%. Okay, quick pause here for a super important exam term, ethnic. Now, it's really easy to get this wrong. This is not about what people look like or their race. It's all about a shared culture. It's about people who feel connected because they have a common background, a common history, a shared story. That's the key thing to remember. So, faced with that tricky situation in Brussels, what did Belgium do? Well, they had a choice, and they chose what might seem like the harder path, but it turned out to be the smarter one. They decided to talk, to negotiate, to compromise. They actually worked to figure out how to live together. They chose a path of accommodation. And this slide right here is the absolute turning point of our story. Think of it like a crossroads. Both countries arrived at this point, facing the same basic problem. Belgium took one road, accommodation. But Sri Lanka? Sri Lanka took a completely different road, one called majoritarianism. Two nations, same problem, totally different answers. So what did this accommodation look like in Belgium? Well, instead of pretending their differences didn't exist, their leaders did something brilliant. They built a system around those differences. Get this, they actually changed their constitution 4 times to get it right. They created this really clever setup where, for instance, the main government had to have the same number of Dutch-speaking and French-speaking ministers. What did that do? It meant no single group could just call all the shots. And that right there is what kept the country together. Now, let's look at Sri Lanka's path, the total opposite. Here, the leaders of the Sinhala majority, remember they're 74% of the population, they didn't really look for a compromise. Instead, they saw their numbers as a ticket to dominate, to control the government completely. And that brings us to our second key exam term, majoritarianism. It's a bit of a mouthful, but the idea is simple. It's the belief that just because your community is the majority, you should be able to rule however you want, and you can totally disregard what the minority groups think or need. As you're about to see, this is a really dangerous way of thinking. And this wasn't something that happened all at once. It was a gradual process, step by step. Look at this timeline. Sri Lanka gets its independence in 1948. Pretty soon after, the government starts making moves to put the Sinhala community on top. In 1956, they pass a law making Sinhala the only official language. Imagine being a Tamil speaker. Then they brought in policies that gave Sinhala speakers a huge advantage when applying for university spots and government jobs. Each one of these steps pushed the Tamil community further and further to the side. So, what was the result of all this? Well, you can imagine. The Sri Lankan Tamils felt completely ignored, sidelined. They felt like their language didn't matter, their culture wasn't respected, and their political rights were just being trampled on. This feeling of being an outsider in your own country, this alienation, it was about to have devastating consequences. Okay, so we've seen the two paths, the path of accommodation and the path of majority rule. Now it's time for the verdict. Let's put the results side by side and see what happened. And wow, the difference is just night and day. It couldn't be clearer. In Belgium, by sharing power, they got political stability. They kept their country united. They avoided a major conflict. And in Sri Lanka, imposing the will of the majority led to the exact opposite, political instability, that deep sense of alienation we talked about, and ultimately a terrible and tragic civil war. All right, let's bring it all home now. This is the part you absolutely want to lock in for your exam. We're going to boil this all down to the most important takeaways. This is the so what of our whole story. Remember that question we started with? The idea that sharing power equals dividing power, which equals a weaker country? Well, after seeing the stories of Belgium and Sri Lanka, what do you think? What's the real answer here? The answer is a massive, emphatic no. It's just not true. In fact, what we've seen is that the exact opposite is true. A smart, well-designed system of power sharing actually strengthens a country. It makes it stronger by reducing conflict and holding true to the real spirit of democracy. So, why is power sharing so desirable? Well, here are the key reasons you need to know. First, it just makes sense. It lowers the chances of conflict between different groups. When people feel included, they're less likely to fight. Second, that leads to a much more stable political system. And third, and maybe most importantly, it's the very spirit of democracy itself. A real democracy is one where everyone has a voice. And there you have it. That's our deep dive into power sharing. We really hope this has cleared things up and that you're feeling confident and ready to tackle any question that comes your way. Remember, if you need anything else, admissions help, detailed notes, or expert guidance, get in touch with us at A1 Institute. All the info, including our number, is right down there in the description. Thanks so much for tuning in. Now go ace that exam. But hey, before you click away, here's one last thing to chew on. Today, we talked a lot about sharing power between different cultural groups. But what are some other ways power gets shared in a healthy democracy? Think about it for a bit. It goes deeper than you might think. All right, that's all for now. Thanks for watching.